How do you live out your faith in the context of the business that God has entrusted you with?
I want people to see the joy of Christ.
Every morning we need to realize what grace has done for us.
You know, like take care of the business. Always look for the business. So become a student of the business.
The only way that we can do it is we have to stay connected to the vine. We have to be in the Word. We have to pray. We have to let God lead that.
This is a Christian business podcast. Well, we are finally back. It has been, we were just talking with Forrest here. It was 2 years ago, January of 23, we put out our first episode, but I don't think we've put out an episode in, 8-10 months? Who was it, like Andrew and Ariel or something? Andrew was talking about being our new co-host, but I didn't invite him today. I'm sorry, Andrew. But welcome to a Christian business podcast, the faith stories of business owners like you, or the owners of companies that you work for. And so I am delighted today to be joined by actually my niece, DeAnna Strong. Not much longer strong.
Not much longer.
Not
no,
much longer?
no.
How many more hours and minutes?
I don't know how many hours. I do know that's just under 7 months, though.
Just under 7 months.
Yeah, just under 7 months.
DeAnna will be married, and so she's excited about that. But really, what originally had brought DeAnna to the podcast is she is the owner of Signature Business Branding, but has now moved more into photography. And so we're going to hear a lot about her story and Haven Hue Photography.
Haven Hue Studios, yeah.
Haven Hue Studios.
You got it.
I'm not even going to do it
It's
anymore.
a tongue twister.
I'm just going to let you.
It's okay. I'll take the reins. You got it.
You take that one. So, DeAnna, I have known DeAnna since she was born.
Mm-hmm.
And our stories go back and forth and cross and some wild craziness. And so we're going to let her tell as much or as little of that as she feels comfortable telling, knowing that it's out there on the line. And so we're gonna dig in. Normally we start with a devotional, but God working in DeAnna's life is as I have seen, such a powerful force to see where she's come from and where she is now. I don't want to overshadow that with just some, a devotion that I just happen to pull out. So I'm actually we're just gonna jump right in and say, hi, DeAnna,
yes.
Welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Thanks for
Hi.
joining us.
Hi. I am delighted to be here, actually. Such a spur of the moment thing, but super exciting. But yeah, so my faith journey is pretty interesting. It's a tale.
Start way back.
Way back.
As far back as you are comfortable going.
Yeah, for sure.
Way back to, my goodness, grandma's house.
Yeah.
When I met you.
Yeah. So growing up, I, visited my grandma's house a lot. Grandma on my mom's side, and she was very, very much into faith. She really enjoyed going to church. Wacky Wednesdays were such a thing. Showing up, going to church events. And it was a Methodist church, and I quite enjoyed it, I would say, for the most part, until I got a little bit older, and I kind of fell away from the church. I kind of developed this very big disdain for people within the church, not necessarily God. I felt like the church was not a place for me. Like I couldn't go there. I didn't feel like a safe place anymore.
Didn't feel like it was safe in terms of an emotionally safe place, or didn't feel like you were welcome there? Didn't feel like you were a part of that group?
It was like a conglomerate. It was like everything kind of coming together. It was, I think there was like a little bit of like hearsay in there too, of like, that inner church chatter between people of, oh, this is going on in her life, or this is going on in her life. And it's just like, you could talk to me. You could just say, hey, what's going on? What's your story, sort of thing.
So kind of a talking about you behind your back in front of your face kind of thing.
Yeah.
Everybody is a distant, there's no real connection, no authentic relationship.
Yeah.
And a sense of belonging wasn't really there. Did you get the sense that people wanted to offer a sense of belonging but didn't know how? Or do you think they were just not interested in that? Or what was the sense you got?
I think it was a couple of different things. I think it was both what you had mentioned about, wanting to offer but not knowing how. And then the other part was like, well, I'm just not going to say anything, or I'm not going to do anything. That's not my business. I'm not going to dive into it, but I'll talk about it.
Got you.
So it's just kind of all over the place for that.
And I think our stories connect there in some ways of looking back, people saying, yeah, we always knew such and such going on in your house growing up and whatnot. I'm like, then why didn't you do something about it? Do you ever get that sense?
Why didn't
maybe?
you offer even just like a prayer to
Right.
like say to me? Like why would you talk about something and then not try to have some sort of solution, even if it wasn't a solution to the problem, but like a solution for that feeling at that point in time?
Right.
Like to help me give that to God, to help me to have that pathway.
Wow.
But
wow.
it's not necessarily that's not how I felt though. And so I went into middle school and high school and just had this feeling of that I couldn't give anything to God, that I had it all on my shoulders. So having that, going through what was middle school into high school of, my mom dealing with some addiction, it was like, okay, you're bouncing around houses, your parents are divorced, your mom's on drugs. What are you going to do? Like, what are you going to lean on? And when you feel like you can't lean on the church or you feel like you can't lean on God, that's a 14-year-old sitting in her kitchen thinking, what am I going to do?
Well, because they say this is the answer, right? And so you're like, okay, great. Well, show me how that fleshes out. Well, Jesus is the answer. Okay, I'm looking at him and I'm still hurting.
Yeah, like I'm sitting here and I'm praying and I don't know what to do. Like I don't know how to pray. Teach me, help me understand what to pray about, how to pray, how to make this about God's will for me and not necessarily trying to take that over into my own little 14-year-old hands trying to figure out what to do. And so it felt like this moment of people looking at me and saying, oh, we can see that she's hurting, but we don't know how to help her.
More of a pity.
Yeah, like a pity. I would say like a pity. You
felt pitied,
yeah,
but nothing beyond that.
Yeah, I felt pitied, and I felt like I felt like I was damaged. Like I was damaged goods that nobody wanted to be around. Like nobody wanted to take the time to say, hey, no, come to church with me. Or like nobody wanted to help me wrestle with what I had to do with the church too. So there wasn't this nice conversation of, oh, you've wrestled with your faith, like you've had this moment of faith and now you're like kind of falling away. Why are you falling away? What are the questions that you have? What can I answer for you?
And so people, do you get the sense maybe that they were just like throwing things? Did you ever feel like they were throwing things at you? Like, oh, maybe she just wants, let's get her some gifts. Let's get her some food. Let's get her some, fun things. Let's just kind of put stuff at her as opposed to connect with you. Did you get any of that?
Yeah,
or not even that?
No, I definitely feel that. Even from like my mom when she was dealing with her addiction, it was like these like throwing items at someone to try to make them forgive you in some sort of way. So like I think I got like a Wii for Christmas one time and I was like freaking out because a Wii was like the biggest thing.
Oh sure.
And
right,
so
right.
like I was like, this is amazing. And then that only does like damage control and only says like, oh yes, everything's good for 2 months and then you're back to reality.
Right.
And so
kind of numbs the pain.
Yeah,
almost reintroduces kind of an addiction. Kind of that addictive kind of fill the void.
Yeah,
kind of concept.
it's a dopamine hit is what it is. Like you
Yes.
get that dopamine from getting the gift, and then you get the gift, and then you're like, oh yay, life is hunky dory again. I don't have to, I don't really have to talk about the really big thing that I should talk about.
Right.
And then it comes up again, and you're like, man, that sucks.
Right. And so you walk through being with, because you were pretty connected to a grandparent who really claimed to have this deep faith, but there were pieces, like there were things that didn't quite line up, and another parent who was distant from their faith but might have a good word or two every once in a while, and in a community that was heavily Christianized and full of Christianese, right? And heavily churched.
Oh, yeah.
The church people. I mean, and so, but here you are saying like, y'all are way up here at like 6 inches deep and I am like 1.5 miles in the ocean, and that's great that we're both wet, but that is the end of the...
Yeah, like your feet are wet, I'm practically like drowning.
Right.
Like how can you like not just throw me a life preserver?
Right.
But not actually like swim out to me and help me
Walk
when you
with
have
me.
Yeah, walk with me. Like help me with that, So I think one of the biggest things too is one of the biggest proponents of my faith, actually like the start of that, was my grandmother on my dad's side passing away from stage 4 small cell carcinoma, which is lung cancer.
Sure.
So, and small cell lung cancer is one of the worst types of lung cancer to get. Like it is very, very difficult to come back from, even for people who are fully healthy.
Right.
And she was not. She had some issues that were going on. So my faith journey started at that point. Now, I didn't know that at that point in time. This is like introspective me looking back.
Start working on you.
Yeah,
And
he's
you're
like,
oh, yeah.
I look back and I'm like, man, a lot of the things that I was wishing for like to happen after that time, and maybe saying wish, but then being taken as a prayer had like started to happen, which was just crazy to watch and to view. But after she passed away, it was really hard for me to regroup, because that was like my safe person. Like I would go to her.
Right.
And that was how my life revolved around making sure that I could talk to her about anything.
So now, was she overtly a person of faith?
Yes, she was. Yeah.
Okay.
So she and my grandfather, they went to church every Sunday, but they were the type of people going to church where if they went to church, it meant like their whole heart was like in that church. Like they were going to go to that church until, there's only 5 congregants left. Like they were going to be going there until it was, until there was no church there to go to, basically.
Right.
So they would just go there and go. They would support the church. They'd have those potlucks. They've had the, fish fries and all those types of things. But it was also a place where they did this thing where I think if somebody's struggling with faith and they want to know more, their parents should probably do it, or grandparents should do it, is make them go to church at least on Christmas and Easter. Like just 2 times a year. Just 2. Like you don't need to go, every other time. Like maybe you feel uncomfortable. Maybe there is something, in you that's like a twinge whenever you walk through those doors. But those 2 times, I think, are some of the most like welcoming times of the year to go to church.
People are welcoming.
Yes.
There's a lot more people there that maybe are in a similar situation to you.
Yes.
There's a little more authenticity. It's a happy time. It's a joyful time, and the pastor is typically speaking about things for people who are not normally a part of the faith community.
Yeah.
So all of those pieces together, but also, okay, if you're there during that Christmas or Easter time, and you come to a spot later in life where you fall on your face, there are a few moments of, hey, that was a happy time. That was a happy place. Where's my happy place? Oh, it's Christmas Eve service with grandma, right? Yeah. And why was that such a happy time? And so it kind of leads you that. I can see that. I could see that being a blessing long term.
Yeah, it was. I think it was also this conversation that we had when I like turned a certain age in high school, where my grandpa was like, listen, you don't have to go with us to church now if you don't want to, but we still are going to require that you go to church twice a year on Easter and Christmas.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was such an interesting relationship because I felt like I had this choice in it, but I was also still a kid, so I did still need some structure. Versus like in other areas of my life, it was just very cut and dry. Like you're going to do this thing, and that's the end of the story.
Right.
And then fast forward after my grandmother died, after I got like semi involved with the church with going on Christmas and Easter or whatever it might be, I get to this point where I'm in college and I am like majorly wrestling with faith. And I feel like that happens a lot in college with all of the different types of, education and information that you receive. There's just so much. I started to go through that, and I had this sort of epiphany that I was like, man, I've gotten here. I was like, how did I get here? I was like, this is a good question to ask, because there's a lot that's happened to me.
Well, if you look at your situation growing up, I mean, you blew all the statistics, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the statistics, a child that is like born into a addictive household has a significantly less likely chance to go to college, and even a more significantly less likely chance to graduate from college. Some don't even earn a high school degree.
Right.
Like they don't even get a GED.
Absolutely. To have a job, to have a, not only a job, but to own a business, to, to get, goodness.
It would spend stacked against me.
Right. Like, okay, they listen to the talk about, the probabilities of Jesus meeting all these prophecies. And like, is this, I was just thinking about just sitting here, the probability of Jesus meeting just 8 prophecies in the Old Testament. They put a mathematical probability, and it's like, I don't know, covering the state of Texas with silver dollars and putting an X on one and sending you out blindfolded into the state of Texas, like a foot deep, and sending you out blindfolded into the state of Texas and asking you to pick up that one. That probability of Jesus meeting just 8 of the prophecies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at, like, I'm just sitting here looking at your life, and I'm like, what the world did is put DeAnna in a situation, and okay, maybe not the size of Texas, maybe Rhode Island, but that's still a crap ton of silver dollars
for one person.
And she walked out by the grace of God blindfolded and picked up the silver dollar with a red X on it.
Yeah.
And it's like, you broke a ton of statistics, and obviously it's by the hand of God in your life, and you can look back and see that, just like you were saying.
Yeah.
Looking back, even before I knew he was, you know, working in my life, I can now look back and see it, and how often he does that. So you kind of hobble your way through middle school, high school. Grandma passes
in 2019. So I graduated high school in 2018. I know I'm going to not age myself there. I'm very young, but I graduated high school in 2018, and then she passed away in 2019. So a year afterwards. And yeah, it was October of 2019 is when she passed. So then from there on, I mean, I was already in school at that point. I already started going to college. Obviously, we know what happened in 2020. We know that there was a pandemic. And unfortunately, at my school, they sent us emails that we could either, you know, leave campus and go back home, or that we were going to have to try to advocate for ourselves to stay in the dorms. I could have a whole nother episode on going over that. But the gist of it is that I decided that I needed to leave school at that point in time. So I left, and not knowing where my scholarship was going to be, not knowing anything.
Well, because, let me back you up just a little bit. Okay, so you graduate high school, and you want to go to college. And you obviously very talented artistically, and awards, etc. And so you were at school, like, on, like, heavy scholarship. So what would, I'm going to give you the opportunity just for a moment to brag on yourself, and it's okay because I'm asking you.
Okay.
So tell me how you went from high school with broken family, addiction in the family, you know, broken back and forth, multiple parents in multiple marriages, all of that craziness, all the statistical stuff, to how did you get into college?
Yeah, that's a great question, which I love to talk about, because I had 2 teachers in high school. I feel like there's always going to be at least one teacher that maybe a kid, you know, gravitates towards. I had 2. I had my English teacher, AP English teacher, Mrs. Eaton. I love her. She's great. Mrs. Hurley as well. She was my art teacher. And for those of you that don't know, I was a very big art kid. I did a lot of art in high school, middle school, and in high school, I think I won something like 45 art awards. It was quite a bit. And I did my applications to college. Since I was technically considered low income, all of my applications were free to every single college. So I basically applied to, I think, 9 or 10 different schools, because I was like, I'm going to get into one, right? I have to get into one. I ended up applying to the University of Michigan. And I ended up qualifying for what's called their Go Blue Guarantee, which is their Go Blue Guarantee. That's a tongue twister too. Go Blue Guarantee was a scholarship where they basically cover for 4 years of tuition and room and board. So I, at this point in time, have not paid more than, I think, $1,500 for school, and I graduate in May. So
you'll graduate with a degree in
history.
History.
Yeah, I know, right? Throws people for a loop when I say that, but I really enjoy history. My first 2 years at school were art, though. Like, I did study art. I studied graphic design. I studied a little bit of photography as well. I actually took 2 photography classes, some print classes, a jewelry class even, which was really fun.
Jewelry class?
I know, right?
I mean, hey, it's free. Why not?
I know. I'm like, jewelry class is super fun, actually. We got to work with copper, and we got to learn about enameling. Is that practical for everyday use? Probably not.
So how much, and because I heard stories from the family, and we only reconnected, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
2 years
something
ago.
Like that. And so how much of that scholarship was based on your art abilities?
Yeah, so it's like for the Go Blue guarantee, it's pretty heavily weighted when it comes to the financial situation.
Okay.
But getting into the art school was the hard thing.
Got it.
So it was a 10% acceptance rate.
10% acceptance rates
10%.
getting into the art
Yeah,
school.
so there was about 1,500 applicants and only 150 got in.
Oh, okay.
So it was a very cutthroat program,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because I don't really think about that when you think about art, but it was a cutthroat program. And I remember I was on the phone with somebody who was part of the admissions department, and I was like, what score do I need to get on an SAT to be like top dog, to be like considered for this? And she said, you need to get a score above 1,000 at least. And I said, okay. So I had to retake the SAT actually a couple different times because I'm not a good test taker. And so I had to retake it quite a bit. But after that, my portfolio was what weighted it for me to get in. And I didn't get waitlisted. I just got in. So my portfolio was like, I would say killer.
Okay.
Just to give myself a little bit of a pat on the back there, because I worked on my portfolio for goodness, I mean, technically a year and a half at that point.
Well, back when I was cruising Facebook, I remember seeing some stuff that you would post on Facebook. Wow.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you make your way into University of Michigan's art program and blow the statistics, and then you finished a degree, didn't you?
No, so I finished technically in high school. I did a graphic design program that was 2 years at NC Resa.
Oh, you did that? Okay.
Yeah, and
tech
then
school. Yep.
I did the tech school. I could have then gone to Ferris State University and had what's called like an acquired associates.
But why when you can go to U of M for free?
Yeah, so I was like, I'm not going to pay to go to Ferris State when I can go to U of M for practically free at this point.
Right.
So that was the decision that I made, and I knew that I was going to be giving up those credits. But it just seemed like the right decision at the point in time.
So the stories I got of your entrance into college were slightly exaggerated.
I'm sure they were,
but
still definitely a statistic breaker when it comes getting into college or getting through high school. I was in the top 25% of my class. Now, if I tell you that my class was only 98 kids, that kind of lowers that a little bit. But I was in the top 25 of those kids though, which was still fun. And I still have all of my different art awards that I'm really, really proud of from high school. Most of which for art were from the regional or the state level.
Gotcha.
So I did a lot of entry ones, but then I also went on and did like, West Michigan Showcase and a couple of other things as well. Never won at West Michigan Showcase. I'm still a little bit peeved about that.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
The other 45 weren't enough.
I know. The other.
All right, I think you lost your permission to brag anymore. I gave it to you earlier. I'm taking it away.
You can take it away. It's okay. Humbling is a good thing.
So you graduate University of Michigan. Or I'm sorry, you're graduating University of Michigan in May. And through that process, so grandma passes away. You kind of have a crisis of faith, crisis of life, but not quite all the way there connecting the dots, Jesus, the cross, the empty tomb.
Yeah, no. We're still getting in there. We're still getting the nitty-gritty. So
right.
It's really funny because then in between, in COVID times, right? Even before I go back to university, because I took a break from university. At the University of Michigan, they either wanted us to leave or they wanted us to advocate for ourselves to stay there. Whole nother thing. But I decided that I was going to leave. And so I then slowly, or actually very fast after that, got into a relationship with somebody that I probably shouldn't have gotten into a relationship to.
Okay.
And, I will never speak ill of this person ever because there definitely was never anything ill to say. But it was just wrong person, wrong time.
Right.
So it was both of those things. And so we ended up living together, which was a really wild time. And not a lot of people know of that time because I was just so secluded from the world. I just didn't know what I wanted. I was so confused.
Hurting.
Broken. I was just kept falling further away. And nobody was checking in on me. Nobody knew what was going on. And then
now I'm going to push on that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Nobody knew what was going on.
Yeah.
Did nobody know what was going on because they didn't want to, or do you think if they had wanted to,
I didn't tell them.
I was going to say, if they had wanted to, might they have met some resistance?
No, they might. They definitely 2020, 2021 me probably would have been like, oh, everything's fine. I don't know what you're talking about. Everything's fine. And that's not at all how it was, but I felt like I had to keep it together. If I didn't keep it together, then my whole life was going to fall apart.
Do you think that possibility in your head came from somewhere?
Maybe. Possibly. Mayhaps. Not completely sure, but
I'll just set that right there and we'll walk away if you want.
it could be. It could be. But I think the bigger thing, like the bigger decision that I made was I got out of that relationship that I was in. That was unhealthy for me, not necessarily an unhealthy person, but just unhealthy for me.
Mhm.
And I decided that I was no longer going to live in that area. I was going to basically do a hard reset. I was going to move back in with my best friend and her family.
Mhm.
And I was going to just start going to the community college because I didn't know if I still had my scholarship at the University of Michigan.
Why would you not have your scholarship at the University
There
of Michigan?
was, during COVID, there was a lot of scholarship talk. So basically, if you stopped going to school during COVID, there was a possibility for you to lose your scholarship. It was very slim, but I took such a long gap that I didn't know if
Okay.
going back was going to be possible.
Because you went back to kind of help take care of you, kind of help take care of Grandpa, right?
I kind of went back to do a few different things. So I went back to take care of me because I didn't know what was going on with my life. I was so confused. So I had just gotten out of this relationship where I thought I was with the love of my life. Checks out what I was not. And so I then go and live with my best friend and her family. I get a job as an oil change tech, which is such a wild
That
time.
was so funny when you told me that.
I know, right?
I'm actually an oil change tech. I'm
Yeah.
like, you're a what?
Yeah, I became an oil change tech.
Misogynistic much, Uncle Aaron? Yeah, okay.
The bottom side stuff for oil on cars and trucks and SUVs, all that type of stuff. And it was really fun. But I then was like, okay, I'm just going to go to the Muskegon Community College. I was like, I'm just going to go there, get some gen ed credits, and then I will figure the rest out. Things are going to be fine.
Right.
And
I can do this.
I can do this. We're going to get through it. It's going to be fine. And I just felt like this, like an inarbored strength within me at that point in time. And looking back, I'm like, God was pushing me to like get somewhere. There was somewhere I needed to be. And I found out I could go back to the University of Michigan. And I was like, well, this is it. This is my ticket out of here. I'm going to go to the University of Michigan. I'm going to figure all this out. Notice how I'm using I statements too, because that's how my mind was thinking.
Oh, I wasn't. I mean, I was kind of alluding to that, but
like I was just like, I kept having these I statements of like, I can do this. Things are going to be okay. I'm going to get out of this. I'm, you know, like that's just how it was. Well, checks out. I get, you know, I'm getting ready to go back to school and I meet my now fiance and his mom is a pastor.
Well.
And so I'm like, man, God really does work in mysterious ways sometimes. And I love that about him. So I'm getting connected with him. I'm getting to know him and his family. And fast forward a little bit, and they're all supporting me to go back to school. And so I'm then going back to school. I'm getting my degree, and then I find out that my future mother-in-law is preaching at one of the churches that's close to Ann Arbor. And I'm like, oh, I'll go to that church and I'll see like what it's all about. And at this point, I'm still very kind of like undeclared in my faith journey.
I remember having a conversation because we reconnected after a while, and I think I asked you like at point blank, like, so where are you at with Jesus? And you were like, so yeah.
I was
like very non-committal.
Yeah,
very,
I was like, this is a very rocky relationship at the moment.
So you haven't talked to me in 10 years, Uncle Aaron, and now you want to know where I'm at with Jesus. Like, way to just ease in, right?
Yeah, way to just say like, hey, what's your faith? What are you doing?
But that's me anyway. So
yeah, and I ended up going to this church, and I met some amazing people, some great people, and not only that, that church is. Every time that I walk in there, even if it's not during a Sunday service, it is filled with the Holy Spirit. So I walk in there and I know instantly that God is with me. And that's such a euphoric feeling to have when you have walked into a church previously and felt looked down upon.
Right.
So you walk into a church and you're suddenly like lifted, and you have this weight that's lifted off your shoulders. And that was something that I think snapped a change in me, and I was like, man, this place is fun.
These people are real.
Yeah, these people
really
are real.
They really do care about me. Like,
they care.
I belong here.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like I can get involved with them. I can tell them about my life. I can be honest. I can tell them that I'm not fine, and there's going to be some sort of conversation on how I can give that to God. And that was just what ended up sparking me going to that church more and
Mhm.
more and getting
Mhm.
involved more, going to youth nights, going to
Mhm.
college nights, going to like all these things that the church was
Mhm.
putting on. And then I think it was in August of 2023 is actually when I decided to get baptized.
Mm.
And that was like the moment when everything just like came to a head. And I
Mm.
was like, man, where has this been?
Right.
Where have I been actually? Like what have I been doing that has been like limiting this? Because I feel
Mhm.
like I've been trying to take control. And
I.
I. And now it's like, okay, hey God, I got this thing.
I can't do it
I
on my
can't do it.
own.
So here's what I'm going to do. This is for you. I'm going to lay this at your feet. And I know and I trust that you are going to, that you're going to do it, that you're going to make the mountains move, that you're going to do something to either rectify this or you're going to teach me a lesson.
Well, and really, I mean, that is the prerequisite for coming to faith in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about the cross says you can't do it. Because again, and I've said this before, I mean, what are we going to do? Are we going to show up at the foot of the cross and look up there at Jesus and be like, hey, appreciate all you did. You want to come down? I'll finish up.
Mm-hmm.
Like to that extreme, when I put it like that,
Mhm.
it's so like, it puts into perspective that it's so exaggerated that it shows like how absolutely ridiculous it is
Mm-hmm.
to even pretend to think that we can bring
Mhm.
something to the table when we come to the cross. The cross in and of itself necessitates that we say, I need the cross.
Yeah.
And so, just such a huge piece of that. And you went to the cross and you said, hey, I appreciate what you're doing up there. I need it.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
can't do any of it. So
Yeah.
thank you for finishing.
Yeah.
Thank you for the empty tomb.
Yeah.
Here is all of my life that goes up there on the cross with you. And now you start to talk about, I've
Yeah.
been crucified in Christ, as Galatians talks about, and completely laying that down in front of God
Mm-hmm.
and just letting it go.
Yeah.
So for a person who, in some ways, was in a victim type role,
Mm-hmm.
a victim of circumstance of
Yeah.
the world around her for
Mhm.
so long, and then in some ways, it appeared to be that she was able to control that situation.
Mhm.
Hey, I got into college. I
Mhm.
got, I beat the odds. I
Mhm.
was one of 10, to go through that and then to find out that still wasn't it.
Mm-hmm.
What did that do to you emotionally? Like what was the breaking point? What was the I can't do this?
It was during that point in time when I was in that relationship that I shouldn't have been in. And I was just the person that I was with was an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that I was agnostic, which was, you can't disprove or prove of a God, right? And so I thought that I was agnostic. I was going to basically stick with that. I was pretty strong in that belief. And I just, being with somebody who is atheist, I was like, this is just reinforcing everything that I'm thinking when it comes to, is there a God, is there not a God sort of conversation. And I just realized somewhere along the way that I was like, you know what? No, I think there is a God.
I don't believe you.
Yeah,
Right.
I was like, I don't think I believe you. And I was like, I think I'm bordering on not being agnostic and actually being a person of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that was the reason that we ended up breaking up. There was a bunch of other things that happened
Right.
and ended up we breaking up. But that moment was kind of like a catalyst for me to better understand.
Really, the questioning of your own lack of faith
Mhm.
in Christ
Mhm.
pushed you to faith in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think a lot of times we as and I think this is important. I want to put that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. I want to put that out there. We so often as Christians are afraid to have our faith challenged,
Mhm.
are afraid to go into the tough questions. And ultimately, what really that does, if we allow it to, is it push us even farther into our faith.
Mm-hmm.
The simple things like, well, what about the earth being 65 billion years old?
Mhm.
Okay, well, we want to stay away from stuff like that
Mhm.
because we're afraid that it will give us a crisis of faith.
Yeah.
when the fact of the matter is if we lean into that and look scripturally and find answers to those questions, it can actually strengthen our faith and draw us closer to God.
Yeah.
And elevate our opinion of him, whether it's his sovereignty or his master plan or his strength or power
or goodness.
All of that goodness, right? Oh my goodness, this looks terrible. Well, wait a minute.
Why is it terrible?
Right. Okay, now if we shift our thinking, now we get a glimpse into another facet of how glorious and how good God is. So I think that's really interesting to hear that from even before you would consider yourself a person of faith, someone who was atheistic caused you to recognize how much you weren't.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It was also like this moment too of, man, I really have beaten the odds. How did that happen? How did I get here? What are, like, asking the questions of, like, what we talk, like what you read about in Genesis, like creation stories, like, how did we all get here? Like, it just started spiraling. And I was like, all in a good way. I was like, I want the answers to these questions. Well, the answer to these questions is going to be in a book. And I don't think it's like my books at school. I think it's going to be in the Bible. And I need to read that to understand better. Even, I think I started reading the Bible a little bit of a spite at first. I kind of was like, I'm going to prove this wrong.
Right.
I'm going to say that this is wrong.
Josh McDowell might have a couple of, and who was it wrote a case for Christ? I don't know. Anyway, there's a couple of guys that did that. A journalist did that. Like, fine, I'll prove you Christians wrong. And now they are some of the foremost Christian authors out there.
Yeah, it's like,
lean into the question.
Yeah, lean into the question. I think the best thing that we can do is wrestle, because when you're wrestling, you're strengthening a muscle, right? Like, you're strengthening that over and over again. So, I mean, when you're building your muscles, there's lactic acid that builds up and it's painful, right? You're going to be sore, but you're going to get an answer. You're going to get results.
Right.
And so I think those types of things, those types of questions that I leaned into, those were the types of things that just kept building that foundation stronger and stronger. And then it just ended up being to where, if I had something that was so overwhelming for me that I was like, this is, I can't do it, right? And I would get back into that, like, I statement. I would just be like, you know what? I can't, and that's okay, because God can.
Right.
And that's kind of where, like, my mind would go with that process.
Right.
So
I'll ask you to forgive the background noise. The heater in this room is making a bunch of clicking noises. It's not your car. Don't worry. If you're in the car trying to figure out why these noises are coming through, it's the heater. But, you might not even hear it. Okay. All right. Forrest is on it. So we will just have this. We'll pretend it's applause for our, for DeAnna telling her story.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So you come to faith in Christ in August.
Yep.
And life's turned around. Let's back up now, as we always do on the podcast. We get your faith story, and now we're going to talk about your business story. And wow, God thing there too, right? So you're changing oil, right?
Yep.
Things are good, and you get connected with, this is where Michelle DuBois with Signature Business Branding, who was previously on the podcast as Signature Business Branding, but this is Signature Business Branding episode 2, because Michelle and you connected. So tell me that story. So you're changing oil, and then what happens? So
actually, kind of you happened is kind of how that happened. We got introduced through you, in case you forgot. But so I just remember I got introduced to Michelle, and she had this big idea of wanting to, like, help with logos and branding and make it happen for those in the community that she's known about and that she's worked with. And she started to have it happen where there was a lot of work. And it was too much work for one person. And so I got connected with her, and suddenly I was working 2 jobs. I was doing the oil change stuff, and then on my laptop I was doing graphic design. I was helping with logos. I was helping being a sounding board for her to bounce ideas off of as we're kind of making these big branding packages for, these businesses that are up and coming. And that was such an interesting time in my life, because Michelle is also a woman of faith, right? And so
I have to guess that Michelle did not take long to start talking Jesus, because that's kind of the way, like, for me to see you out for the first time in 7, 8, 10 years and be like, where you at with Jesus? I bet Michelle had me beat by at least 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, she, like, one of the questions I think that came up in conversation was, what kind of church do you go to? And I was like, well, I don't really have a church that I go to at the moment. However, I would be interested in going to one. And
Can I make an admission? Can I make a confession?
for sure.
I may or may not have had that in mind when I connected you with Michelle.
Listen,
let the bulldog
listen,
loose on your face.
I have you to thank then, because this is a conversation that I think I didn't want to start, but
you wanted to have.
I wanted to have.
And Michelle
was like
Michelle will
Yeah.
not have the conversation.
Exactly.
Like as your uncle, having seen you, I mean, literally, we were probably talking for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I brought it up, and Michelle probably brought it up in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And when I brought it up and put it out there, I was like, okay, first time seeing it in a long time. It was a baseball game, right?
Yeah, it was something like that.
So just kind of let it go and move on. And all right, I'll pray about this.
Yeah.
And then it was like graphic design, and I was like, oh boy, she could probably connect with
Michelle.
Go, Michelle, go.
Michelle, if you're listening to this, you may or may not have been the catalyst to my journey. But yeah, it was just such an interesting time to work with her, because all of the stuff that she did, and that we did together, I could see that her heart was in it through Christ, and I was just blown away by that. I was like, how can somebody be so intrigued about someone or in faith and take that into work? I was like, how does that work?
Somebody should do a podcast about that.
Somebody should do a podcast about that. That would be great. I'd listen to that.
So you and Michelle hook up. You start working with Signature Business Branding with Michelle.
Yep.
And she's throwing you work.
Yep.
And then what happened?
Yeah. So what happened is we got connected. We were doing work and everything. I got into school. Things were getting busy for me. I was working probably 3 jobs at once, overworking myself for sure. I had a tendency to do that. I don't necessarily do that as much anymore, I feel. I've gotten better about that. God's given me a lot of wisdom in that area, I feel like. But I was really, really overworking myself. And then there came up an opportunity where Michelle was going to be going to, a new position. She got offered a new position, and I wanted to fully support her in that. And I didn't know that she was then going to offer me Signature Business Branding, the thing that we'd been building for a year and a half. And I very naively at that point in time thought, yes, I can handle that. And I had said, I can handle it. And I didn't know that at that point in time, that was not the route that I think I should have gone, that I think was in the cards at that point in time. I think I was taking the reins a little bit too much in that point. And it got to a point where I was like, I was trying to make sure that all the paperwork was filed for certain things. I was making sure that I could talk to clients, and I was also in school, and I had a regular 9 to 5 job kind of while I was in school. So it was just work on top of work. And then I think I realized at a certain point that I had to really be 100% honest with myself about where I was at. And I texted Michelle this really long message, actually. I have it in my phone somewhere. I texted it to her and I said, I really, really appreciate this opportunity that you've given me, and all of the help that you've given me in both work, but then also in like a faith perspective. Like, I appreciate you so much, but I don't think that me taking this on was the right call. And I said that because at that point in time, I felt like I was yet again falling apart. And I was like, why am I falling apart? Everything was so good.
You had all the things.
Yeah,
you did all the things.
I did all the things. What was going on? The thing is that what people don't like to tell you is that when you're in your walk with Christ, the enemy likes to try to mess things up. So the enemy tries to get in there and, make you doubt. The enemy is self-doubt. Self-doubt is the enemy. So, and not self-doubt in the way that it's like, oh, I shouldn't do that thing. It was like self-deprecating. It was just so.
I'm worthless. I
can't do it. Like, why do I have this? This is not mine. What am I doing? So there's a lot of that sort of talk within, I think, my life at that point in time, where I had all the things. Why was I feeling this way? And that's when I got connected into therapy. And therapy is very good. A Christian therapist, by the way, which was, at this point, I still hadn't been baptized, because this was like, I think, just I think it was a year away at that point in time. And I still just had this inkling of, I was getting into faith. I was understanding it, but it just something wasn't clicking. I was starting that walk with Christ, but the enemy kept trying to get in the way. And it was just hurdle after hurdle after hurdle after already having ran a marathon already. So I think I was tired. I was weary.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah, I was overwhelmed. I was weary.
Now you're running this business.
Yeah.
After a bulldog like Michelle ran it.
Yeah. And I'm like, she's like crazy in the best way. I was like, I love her so much. And I respect her so much more after that, honestly. In just a business way and just in a personal way too, honestly. But yeah, it was just wild. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to take a step back from this. And we're gonna regroup again. We're gonna see what's going on.
I'm gonna right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is my thinking went from I'm to we're.
Really?
So it was like maybe I can give it up to God, right? And this was before being baptized. So I'm like, well, we can figure this out. Thinking like side by side, not him figuring it out.
Right.
Side by side figuring it out. I'm like, we're equals. No, you're not. No, you're not. You think you are, but you're not. So I think I was just very much in that mode of, again, I needed to clean slate up and figure things out. And then I realized that you're never ever going to have a clean slate. So you're going to have to always just kind of lean in to the things that you don't want to lean into.
Right.
And then you'll figure it out.
So you say, Michelle, I can't do this signature business branding thing anymore. And you give it back, or does it dissolve?
I kind of give it back. I kind of like give the reins back to her a little bit. And I just let her know where I'm at. And her response was so amazing. I'm gonna get emotional talking about it because she was just so graceful in her response and understanding of it. There's a bunch of stuff that was also going on behind the scenes, like with my mom at that point in time. At this point in time, my mom had like completely dissolved from the family and moved to a different state and was on different types of drugs. And we could not find her for several months. Like she was just off the grid.
Gone. Right?
Yeah, just gone. And it hit me that if something were to happen to her, I had no idea. And so I was
you would not know.
I was like, I need to figure out where she's at least. And so that consumed my life for a little bit too. But Michelle just had this response of like faith and grace and understanding and wisdom. And
what I'm going to ask you to, and if you get emotional, it's okay.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah,
we got tissues
That's
somewhere.
okay. Yeah.
But unpack that as how she responded, because I think there's a lot of people, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast and have been on this podcast are they really care about the people they work with, and they really pour into people. I can think of the way Justin poured into me, or I think of the way Terry's pouring into Andrew, and just all these phenomenal people are pouring into kind of the next generation, if you will, of business, whether that's older or younger. Yeah. And what are the things, what are the specifics that, how does it look when someone responds with grace and encouragement and love and kindness? How did it go?
Yeah. So I typed up this message that basically was like, admitting where I was at. And I think that's so hard for some of us to do. We might take on so much that we think we can do, right? And then there's this moment where we realize, man, I should have done something different. I was pulled in a different direction at that point in time. And so at that moment, I decided to just be completely and faithfully honest with Michelle about where my heart was at, where everything was at.
Instead of trying to
make it work, right? Instead of trying to force, a triangle peg into a, like pea-sized hole, like trying to figure it out myself.
Was that hard to do from the perspective of not wanting to put yourself out there, or was that hard to do because of something Michelle did or didn't do, or set up the relationship in a way? Like, what things did Michelle do to set up the relationship in a way that you felt safe to do that?
I felt safe to do that because I had been able to go to her about stuff that was going on in my life in general, not just work stuff. I had talked with her about, what was going on with my mom, what was going on, how I dealt with my grandma's death and that journey of that. And she just was a listening person. She got
in your space and was there for you.
Yes.
She didn't get in your space to
Yes.
fix you.
Yes.
But
And so-
she got in your space.
Yeah, she got in my space though. And I was definitely at first, I think I was kind of jarred by it because I was like, why are you in my bubble? What's going
Right.
on? Like,
no, you did.
like,
You're my boss. Just be
like,
my boss.
yeah, like what
right?
are you doing? But she just would pick up on stuff that other people, even people that had been around me for longer, wouldn't pick up on. I now realize that I think God was placing a hand in that for sure. And she just was placed there as a safe person for me to talk with.
So she got into your space, but didn't do it to fix you. She got into your space to love you.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So as we're getting into someone's space, okay. So now she has created this atmosphere where you can send her a big long text and be like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And then when she responded to that, what was it about her response that, well, let's call it worked? What made it? What were all the things that made it work?
It was the understanding, like almost like motherly tone that she used in this, like nurture. She was realizing that in like the most lovingly way possible, she realized that there was some naivety to, me taking it over. And not to the mistake of her at all, but to how I could have felt overwhelmed. And so she understood that feeling of being overwhelmed.
That not everybody is Michelle.
Yeah.
Got
And
it.
she understood that this was something that, while was a great opportunity, a great something to give to someone, that it's also a big responsibility.
And she could have come back with, what do you mean? I gift wrapped this thing for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Put
she
your
could
big girl
have.
pants on and go.
Yeah, she
right?
could have. She could have said, like, why are you doing this? Like, this is not what we had talked about. Like, she could have came back with like anguish or anger, but she didn't. She came back with grace. And that, I think, is the moment when I realized that I wasn't going to disappoint her. And that was the moment where I was like, I can't disappoint her. And I didn't. And that was the point where I realized that she was, in fact, probably one of the best people to talk to.
She was going to be proud of you, whatever you did.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, man, write that crap down.
Yeah. She was going to be proud of me for just even attempting. And I didn't have to worry about all of the gift wrap, all of the stuff that had been done beforehand. It was, you tried. You did it.
Tried.
Yeah, you did it.
And, hey, we'll keep moving.
Yeah,
right?
we
It's
keep
like,
moving.
we
We
got
keep doing the
this.
thing. Yeah. And that,
Excellent.
I think, was the moment where I realized, like, wow, disappointment is such a feeling from, like, just from the enemy. Like, you just
Right.
feel like you're going to be preemptively disappointed about something before you even say something. So I think somebody said to me once, if you never ask the question, the answer is always no. And so if you never say what you need to say to get it off your chest, you never know if they're going to be disappointed or proud of you.
Right.
So,
And you miss out on the potential that
to
they're
get
going
the grace,
to be proud. Right.
Yep, or to get the grace, or to get the praise. So, yeah.
So so she kind of takes that back and she kind of does what she does with it, and you go back to kind of a 9 to 5 and whatever else you're doing, changing oil. Or
Yeah.
And okay, so then you go back to school.
Yep.
And you say, hey, I have this camera.
Yeah, so I bought my camera, and I actually had it for 6 months before I decided to do anything with it, which is so funny that I had it for 6 months. It sat in my closet in its box still, and I just was honestly depressed at that point in time. I didn't know how to be creative in a way that wasn't for school, and that was why I left the art school, in case you're wondering. I left the art school because I felt like I had to be creative in a certain type of way. Otherwise, it wasn't creativity.
I got a lot of friends that went to school for music, and I got one buddy, he didn't touch a piano for like 3 years after he got out of college.
Yeah. You need like a detox.
I don't want to go to work.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to school.
Yeah.
It's like, and so you kind of felt that same
I
thing.
did.
Of like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens to a lot of tangent here. I think that's what happens to a lot of musicians is they write some great music and they do an album and it sells and they get a record deal and they say I need 12 songs this year. And they get to the 12th month and go, crap, I got nothing. And now it's forced creativity.
Yeah.
And forced creativity is not creativity.
No.
That's why we have ChatGPT.
Yeah. ChatGPT.
So, and frankly, that's, my favorite band. Their first album was beautiful. Everything else, junk. So anyway,
Yeah.
So you get this camera and you start doing your thing.
Yeah. So I start in October of 2024. So just last year is when I really started to take photography like seriously. I'd taken photography classes, so like I knew how to work a camera. I knew how to work like a mirrorless or a DSLR camera. And I was like, how do I get to be creative again? How can I do this again in a way that I feel is going to bring light into my life, right? And one of the first things that I did was I was like, I'm just going to offer free photo shoots. They're free. I have a camera. I have an SD card. I can transfer these. This is fine. This is going to be free. I want to give these to people as like a gift. Because if they turn out bad, then I mean, they can't really say anything because they didn't pay for them.
Right.
But if they turn out great, then we've got something here. So I started taking pictures of people and couples from church where I'd met people there. And my first photo shoot that I had with Alexa and Dan, if you're listening to this, I took your photos and I absolutely enjoyed that session wholeheartedly. And I took their photos and I edited them, and then I posted some of them on Facebook. I sent them to them and they were enthralled. They were just enthralled with these pictures. And I realized that I had this moment where I could give somebody a feeling in a picture. Like I could capture something and give it to them.
And there was your creativity.
And there
you
it
found
was.
your creativity
There
again.
it was.
And so, of course, it's on Facebook. Now people start asking.
Yeah, people start asking. They're like, when did you start doing photography? When did this start? How much do you charge? And people are asking me how much I charge. And I was like, nothing. I was like, these are free. I was like, I think my first 2 shoots were free. And then my third one, I charged somebody $50 and I felt still bad about it. So then the fourth one, I didn't charge anything. So like I still feel bad about it, even though the work was
Forrest,
up
we
there.
need some pictures taken, don't we?
Listen, my camera is over in Zeeland, Michigan. So
Oh, okay.
yeah. But I fell in love with capturing those pictures. And I realized that I had the skills and I had the know-how and I had the grace of God and the wisdom from him to put that into this. And that was what fueled Haven Hue Studios.
And so Haven Hue Studios is no longer a nonprofit, right?
No, it's no longer a nonprofit.
Because you're a college student.
Yes, I am a college student.
And college studenting costs money.
It does. It does. So
living costs money.
Yeah.
Weddings cost money.
Weddings cost money.
A
Cars
little bit.
cost money.
Weddings
Things
cost a little bit of money.
My car payment still needs to be paid. That sort of thing.
That's right.
And so I think there was this moment where I realized, man, I could start to charge for this. And I was like, but I'm going to be very faithful in the way that I'm charging for this. Because I'm still very new when it comes to physically being behind a camera. I've taken pictures in high school. I've taken pictures even in middle school and in college. But I still want to be very faithful and honest with where my pricing is going to be. So I started to do just all these different types of photo shoots. I started to do couples. I started to do families. I did a Christmas shoot. Like I did all these different types of things to try to build up that portfolio. And then suddenly I had people reaching out to me for weddings. And I was like,
oh boy.
I was like, weddings? That wasn't even on the table.
But that's a whole nother deal. Because now you're not doing photography. You're doing people control.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is like
huge.
Yeah.
Like there are great photographers that I love you, but they are sucky wedding photographers.
Yeah. And I had done wedding coordination for 2 years. And so I was like, man, I have the knowledge for this too. What am I doing here? Like, let's take it slow. Let's
get the bills paid.
I was like, let's go ahead and we're going to do some engagement shoots. I'm going to do a giveaway. That's going to get people intrigued into what's going on. So I did a giveaway for a couple over on the southeastern side of Michigan. And after I did that, I basically just saw people become more interested in the work that I was doing. And I was very fairly priced when it came to things because, again, I knew that my experience was not going to be there for this. Like a lot of the people were going to be guinea pigs. And they knew that.
Right.
And I made sure that they knew that.
Right.
And somehow there is still this conversation of like having faith and trust in someone, even though you've never met them and you see their work only twice.
Right.
But it was just this wonderful conglomerate. And I didn't even have a name for it yet at that point in time. Like I was just kind of like,
you were DeAnna taking pictures.
I was just DeAnna taking pictures. And then all of a sudden I started to think about it, and I was like, if this is going to be something, I have to do this right. And so I very prayerfully was just thinking about how I can honor people in my life that have helped me get here. How can I honor God? How can I honor the things that matter, right? And I decided on Haven Hue Studios, because Haven Hue Studios is named primarily because every photo that you have that you look back on with a fond memory is a safe haven. So every point in there is a time that you have a memory from or that you can recall, mostly. And hue is because there's hues in there. There's the colors, there's the Pantones, there's the little halftone circles that are in there making all those up. There's the pixels. And studios is just because, that's what it is. It's a studio. It's Haven Hue Studios is capturing those moments and memories into something that you can view. And I named it Haven Hue instead of like, Haven Color or whatever, because my grandmother that passed away in 2019, her name was Wendy Sue. And so Haven Hue is kind of like a homage to that.
Right.
And so the whole thing is dedicated to making sure that those photos and those memories are taken care of. Which is really funny because I actually have it tattooed on me. It says it's all taken care of, which is something that my grandmother that passed away said. So she would say it's all taken care of. Now, what she meant by that was that God had it all taken care of. However, I got this tattoo in 2019 before any of the faith journey happened.
And so it still fits.
It still fits. It
But
still
it just-
fits. It means
God
something
transformed
different.
that.
Yeah, God
Right.
transformed that into
That's
something.
awesome.
Yeah, that to something that means more than I thought it ever could. So, yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So now business plug part. So you are currently in Ann Arbor.
Yep.
And so that's where most of your work is done. Do you have, where are your post-school plans?
Post-school plans. So I currently work as the communications director for a company over here in Granville. So I will be moving back over here. And I'll be in the area for West Michigan photography. Okay. So right now I do Southeastern Michigan and Western Michigan because I have...
You come here all the time?
Yeah, I'm here very frequently.
Grandpa's still...
Yep, Grandpa's still here. And my, future in-laws are over here as well. So I am...
You have this crazy uncle.
I do. Yep, he's here. Sometimes. But yeah, he's here. So I just, I try to make time for this because it's something that's really important to me. And, I've made a logo. I've made like my own little branding package, and I have Michelle to thank for helping me understand all of that process and how that went.
Right.
And that's just some knowledge.
And the business process.
Yeah, and the business process and contracts and all the stuff that you don't think about.
Right.
And then when you think about
Michelle is she's an entrepreneur at the core. Absolutely.
Yes. And so just, all of those types of things and getting all of like the payments set up and then worrying about taxes and like all of this stuff that you don't really think about. And then you get into it and you're like, man, I'm going to lean into my faith in God too with this, because this is out of my wheelhouse now. Creative mind, business mind, two different things.
Right.
So, how do I make this a business? How do I actually forward this?
Because you can have a hobby, you can have a high-paying hobby, and you can have a business.
Yep.
And those are all three very different things.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of be interesting to kind of see how that fleshes out for you in the way that transition, because it legit was a hobby.
Yeah, it
first.
was.
And then it became a hobby that paid you. Do you think you've crossed into the business yet?
Yeah, so something that I actually was going to share with you, and then I ended up getting here just as we were going to be starting. So I actually did just get the LLC for it.
Oh, nice.
So it is an official LLC now.
So Haven Hue Studios LLC.
Yes.
Yes. And you are currently booked out how far?
I am currently booked out. So I actually have a bride that messaged me that was interested in 2026.
Okay.
So that's next year.
Got you. But if somebody had something coming up sooner, wanted some engagement photos,
I'm available.
Or a maternity shoot or something.
I'm available up until I think, because February is pretty booked out already now. Because this is, we're in February now. So
March probably.
Mid-March. I do have a wedding in March, and then I have another couple of other shoots throughout the year.
And
so
you're graduating in May, so
in
that's
May.
probably going to tighten your schedule
Yep.
up a little bit
Yep.
too.
And then married
finals
in
whatnot.
September.
And then
So,
married in
you know,
September. So
yeah, busy schedule. So my best friend is also getting married in August. So, you know, and I'm the maid of honor in that.
So you're not taking those pictures.
No, not taking those pictures. I'm sure how she would love me to, but I'm definitely out of love for her and being present in that moment, I'm not going to do that. And plus, she's
Exactly.
hired a photographer.
There
So
you-
yeah, so I do have a lot of stuff that's going on this year. But then I have another wedding that's in September, but it's after my wedding, obviously.
Got you.
And I'm not going to be taking pictures on my wedding day. That'd be really funny.
Okay.
But yeah, so I have that, and then I also have another wedding in October. So I
Okay.
have a total of 3, close to 4 now. And it,
Okay.
mind you, this was in October of 2024. Having
Right.
3 weddings booked in 1 year already is
That's pretty awesome.
pretty awesome. It's pretty crazy how much growth there has been.
Right.
Like I just started a Facebook page, and then I started a website, and I did all this, and I was like, this is going to get no traction. It's
We're
going to go
gonna-
nowhere.
We're going to put that Facebook page and all DeAnna's contact info in the description. So wherever you're listening to your podcast, you just hit
Oh,
that
thank you.
description button, and you can
Amazing.
find a link to get to DeAnna, and
I
she'll
appreciate
probably
that.
reach out to her and can
Yeah.
get some bookings done. And do you do any kind of so weddings, obviously, maternity, baby pictures, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff? Having spent some time in the business branding world, you
Mhm.
probably have a kind of an idea of how things work from a commercial photography type
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
in the branding space. So you'd probably be open for photography like that too. If
Yeah,
somebody
for sure.
wanted some good shots of, working
Yeah,
their
if
business
somebody
or
wanted like
whatever.
some candid shots of like them in the office with
Mhm.
their, employees,
Mm,
or if somebody
things like
wanted,
that.
product shots as well,
Mhm.
like of, whatever it may be, I'm definitely open to doing those as well.
because you began in photography as an artist.
Yes.
And so you know how to work that, but then you also have the business branding
Mhm.
where you understand the marketing side of
Yes.
things as well, because you do have some marketing background
Yes.
that you took in school, right?
Yes. Yep.
So you've got some of that around. So you more than just capturing those moments, but from the marketing side too, which
Mhm.
again, a lot of people listening to this podcast are kind of looking for ways to make that
Mhm.
work, and whip
Yeah.
out the cell phone, snap a shot, or call DeAnna. You're probably gonna want to call DeAnna. So
Probably.
So, DeAnna, it has been quite a ride. We are glad to be back recording again. We're gonna shoot for video on this one and see
Oh, okay.
see what happens.
Yeah.
And if we don't have video, I'm sorry. We need a videographer, and
You should get a videographer to be
this-
on the podcast.
Well, that would be great. See, we were talking about when it's a hobby versus a bit. We're
Uh-huh.
still in hobby stage
Yeah,
for the
that makes sense.
podcast.
Yeah.
So, but if anybody knows anybody that would be like, oh yeah, I'd love to grab and
Mhm.
edit videos, for you, and be like DeAnna and be like, I would love to do that for free.
I'm still in the intro stage. I haven't charged anybody yet.
Yes,
Very, very
We are-
much in the intro stage.
we are looking for maybe some of that, but otherwise, Forrest does a great job, and we are thankful for him. So, anybody that you would love to hear their story on the podcast, a Christian business podcast, we would love, shoot us an email. We got a website, achristianbusinesspodcast.com. Just spell it all out, and let us know. Reach out to us. We'd love to interview somebody, hear their story. DeAnna, your story is, I think, powerful in what God can do. We typically want to finish up. I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm closing out. Don't shut off yet. DeAnna, so really you bring a perspective that we've been looking for, and that somebody who, kind of was in the business space and then became a Christian,
Mhm.
and speak to somebody else in your shoes, right?
Mhm.
Who is, just coming to faith in Christ, but has been
Mhm.
doing this business thing,
Mhm.
and speak to them
Mhm.
just for a moment of what do you have to share with them, to just some nuggets, some wisdom for them
Mhm.
to have.
The Lord goes before you.
The Lord goes before you.
Mm-hmm. And that was actually, I had that on my mind because the person who onboarded me into the job that I currently have
Mhm.
as my communications
Mhm.
coordinator position, she made a picture frame that said, "The Lord goes before you." And it's on my desk.
Mm,
And so I get that constant reminder of that the Lord goes before me.
mm.
And I think that too often, even established people in their faith
Mhm.
get ahead of themselves, get ahead of God. They put
Mm.
themselves in a position where they are trying their best to keep at a pace that is unsustainable. and they're trying to keep at a pace that they think is going to forward them faster than if they just gave it to God.
Right.
Yeah.
That kind of take your hands off the wheel thing.
Yeah.
Because, and really, especially in the entrepreneur space, and again, most of the folks
Yeah.
listening to this podcast and on this podcast, it's that entrepreneurial space, and we have a tendency to do. I mean, that's a gift that God's given us, but at the same time, He's like, whoa. And here is testimony. You kept trying to do it on your own, and He had given you the gifts, talents, and abilities. I mean, goodness, you know, 10% acceptance rate, right? Like, obviously, you had the talent and the ability even before you were walking with Him to make a lot happen. But
nothing ever started happening till I gave it to Him, though.
Right.
Like there was this thing that I was talking about and writing about was sometimes we pray to God. And we think that we're praying for something. Let's say you pray for a cake and you're praying for that cake and you're like, man, I really, really want to have a great birthday cake, right? And God sets in front of you flour, eggs, milk, butter. And He says, okay, now do the work with me. And then you just say, but where's my cake? You didn't do the work.
Right.
You didn't work with Him. You didn't walk with Him. You didn't bake this cake with Him. This isn't something that you get to now indulge in.
Right.
Because you didn't do the thing that the good Father wants you to do.
And yeah, the cake may taste good at the end, but you have missed out if you don't make it with Him.
Yeah.
You have missed out on incredible opportunities for joy and growth and understanding and being heard and experiencing His presence. That it's a really yummy cake at the end. But it is 10 times, it is infinitely more awesome a cake if you're working with Him in it, and frankly, it's probably going to taste better too.
Yeah, homemade is always better than store-bought.
Well, DeAnna, thank you very much. We appreciate you being on the podcast, and we are praying for you and your future hubby, and we are praying for you in your schooling.
Thank you.
And we're praying for you in your business endeavors.
Thank you.
And we will put all your contact info in the description. So we thank you guys for listening, and check us out, achristianbusinesspodcast.com. Leave us a review if you appreciated the episode. Thanks for listening.